So I'm here today to present a kind of an overview of habitat projects on Lake Michigan from 2011 to 2015. And this is really not comprehensive. This is kind of highlighting about 10 projects. There's a lot to cover here. I'm going to jump from one topic to the next a little bit, so if you doze off, I'll try and summarize at the end for all of it, but I'm going to be skipping topics quite a bit, just a warning there. So I did want to acknowledge some folks that provided me with slides, information, reports, discussions, you name it. So their names are all listed here, and I'll kind of acknowledge their individual work as we go through. So an outline, I'm going to start with describing the fish community objectives and the environmental objectives for Lake Michigan, and then specifically note progress on aquatic connectivity and progress on reef restoration around the lake. Close with just a brief mention of environmental principles and a summary. So there are two fish community objectives for Lake Michigan that are relevant to habitat. The first is to protect and enhance fish habitat and rehabilitate degraded habitats. The second is no net loss of the productive capacity of habitat supporting Lake Michigan's fish communities. High priority is given to restoration and enhancement of historic riverine spawning and nursery areas for anadromous species. The environmental objectives, which are intended to identify desired conditions and impediments to the FCOs, are to protect and restore connectivity and quality tributary spawning and nursery habitats, connectivity and quality coastal wetland spawning and nursery habitats, reef spawning habitats, fish community structure by promoting native species, abundance and diversity, and avoiding further exotic species introduction, and water quality. There's a few presentations this afternoon that will touch on some of these as well. Again, I'm really going to focus on the two that are highlighted in blue here. So, first project. There's been a lot of work recently on sort of connectivity work in the Great Lakes Basin. Lake Michigan to tributary connectivity, some projects, this one published by Januszewski Hartley in 2014, only 17% of tributary habitat has any connectivity with Lake Michigan. And so the dark blue that you see on this picture illustrates areas of connectivity. The light blue is reduced passage, and then the gray is no passage at all. The Nature Conservancy has been working to bring together about 40 different sources of fish observation data to map 42 species basin-wide. And so this is just kind of a glimpse of Lake Michigan, but this has been done around the Great Lakes Basin. And that, along with that, University of Wisconsin-Madison, the McIntyre Lab, has been leading the development of a barrier optimization tool, working with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, the Nature Conservancy, many others to kind of gather data. And the public interface for that is a tool called FishWorks. You may have seen Allison Moody she's a postdoc with Peter McIntyre's lab at UW-Madison, presented last Lake Committee meetings on this tool. But it's basically a decision support tool for prioritizing Great Lakes barrier removals. The website is shown there, greatlakesconnectivity.org. And they're working right now on incorporating a sea lamprey model into this tool to sort of say, if a barrier comes out, what is the increased cost to sea lamprey control? Along those same lines, the GLFC and the Great Lakes Commission has been working on building a sea lamprey visualization tool, which basically shows barriers that are critical for sea lamprey control and allows people to sort of look at, if they're looking at structures around the basin, what are those structures that are really important as far as invasive species. A third sort of decision analysis tool that's going on right now, it's at fishhabitattool.org. And it's a habitat-based decision support tool led by Downstream Strategies and the Great Lakes Basin Fish Habitat Partnership. So this map right now is showing brook trout likelihood of occurrence around Lake Michigan, Lake Superior. There's also information for walleye, cold water, large river, and lithophilic species in this decision tool, where you can look at what their likelihood of occurrence is throughout the basin. It has modules for visualization, for ranking, and for futuring, and there's a number of instructional how-to videos if you go to the site on how you would use it to do those things. And it's not just for the Great Lakes Basin. This tool has information nationwide. Some specific progress towards fish community, or towards the community objective to restore connectivity. One system, the Fisheries Information System for the Fish and Wildlife Service, reports that Since 2011, 367 stream miles have been reconnected on 25 rivers. These two pictures are showing before and after on Osborne Creek on the White River. There's also been numerous projects on the St. Joe, the Boardman, Manitowoc, Peshtigo, Pigeon, Thompson Creek. Lots of tributaries around the Great Lakes have had dam removals, culvert replacements, but improved connectivity in the basin. One thing that we're starting to learn as we work on sort of a connectivity group is that how people report miles of stream gained is not consistent. And so this is very much a minimum number of stream miles reconnected, and that's something that we're working towards defining better. Rob briefly mentioned the Lake Sturgeon Passage project on the Menominee River. This was a huge partnership project that brought together a lot of different groups to put this in, and it's one of those highlighted projects when we're talking about fish passage improvements in the Great Lakes. They've had passage sturgeon now for 2 years, Rob? Is that correct? And we'll continue to monitor for at least another 2, and I think up to 10. So something that I'm most familiar presenting here is a little bit about the new Great Lakes Region Aquatic Habitat Connectivity Collaborative. So the Upper Midwest and Great Lakes Landscape Conservation Cooperative identified aquatic connectivity as one of its 5 focal areas. As such, this Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative was formed to sort of address aquatic connectivity for the LCC. I am one of the coordinators of that. There's a second coordinator, Joe Sheehan, out of Green Bay with the Fish and Wildlife Service. And we sort of took a look at all of the groups around the Great Lakes Basin and identified that the Great Lakes Basin Fish Habitat Partnership had a very similar mission, a lot of the same folks that we would want to engage to talk about aquatic connectivity. And because of that, we're joining the two together as we move forward with this collaborative. So the idea is to bring a wide array of partners together to identify knowledge gaps, to identify connectivity targets, and to develop and refine decision support tools. So this includes a lot of natural resources folks, and we know that even just on the Great Lakes Basin, this is a multifaceted issue of connectivity just for those of us interested in natural resources. When you start bringing in folks from the infrastructure community, it sort of adds a whole nother level to it. So we're hoping to bring that group together, that bigger group, and have some discussions on how to make progress towards connectivity targets. There is dedicated coordination, again, through myself and Joe with the GLFC and the Fish and Wildlife Service to continue making progress on this effort. We held a connectivity workshop March 8th and 9th in Ann Arbor, just with a base group of about 20 people, and we learned a lot. We had some great discussion, and we're going to be holding another one in late June with an expanded group. So something we learned is that these are the challenges we're sort of facing as we're addressing aquatic connectivity in the basin. We asked participants to give us a response to a few questions before they attended the workshop, and we did a word cloud. And for those of you who aren't too familiar with these, the more often a word shows up in a response, the bigger it is in this cloud. So we compiled all of the responses and sort of plugged it into this cool program, Tagcedo, and it gave a pretty clear picture on what the challenges are for aquatic connectivity. And so when folks are asking, well, why should I care about this? Why should I be involved? This is the reason. Nobody is doing everything they want to do with aquatic connectivity because there's a lot of challenges standing in the way. So a united effort is hopefully going to bring a stronger front to address those issues. Okay, so I'm going to change focus a little bit and talk now more about protection and restoration of reef spawning habitats. John Jansen provided me with some information on this slide, which is identifying nearshore reefs in Wisconsin waters. They did some work, School of Freshwater Sciences, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and the Space Science and Engineering Center at UW-Madison, which I honestly didn't know existed until about a week ago. But they did some really cool project of combining aerial photography with some LiDAR bathymetry data and looking at where cladophora were most dense along the shoreline and using that to identify reef habitats. So there are some results available in a real Earth viewer at that website. And then there was a publication by Houghton and Jansen that came out just last year on the competitive interactions around gobies and yellow perch on those habitats. There is also, John was just showing me a NOAA site that gives basin-wide information. So this is, I think, just for the Wisconsin shoreline. But basin-wide, there's some bathymetry data from NOAA available on their website. Next project, these slides are courtesy of Josh Dube with the Illinois Natural History Survey. And this is some work they did using side-scan sonar and a few other things to map Julien's and Waukegan reefs. And we've heard about those from a number of people talking about lake trout and Cisco. But these are historically productive offshore commercial fishing sites. Lake trout have been observed aggregating on these sites, but natural reproduction is challenging to document. And there was a lack of detailed substrate information. So they developed high-resolution substrate and bathymetry maps. They're georeferenced bathymetric readings, side-scan sonar, and underwater video. And here's just a few pictures showing the results. The turquoise is fractured bedrock. The dark blue is described as massive bedrock. I'm not sure what the difference is, but I'm guessing it's just bigger. So this is pictures of, again, Julien's Reef and Waukegan Reef. Some of the results from that work. Oh, and these are the bathymetric maps too. So there were, Julien's Reef had 2% observed suitable substrate, Waukegan 1%, and then Waukegan South, which was actually newly identified, and I believe it is over there. So that was newly identified in this, and it has about 6% suitable substrate for spawning. So even though there's this spawning habitat available, the observation was they weren't seeing a lot of lake trout egg deposition in the areas, and likely because non-native species may alter habitat suitability. So extensive dracaenid coverage, cladophora around Gobi, those sorts of things mean that just because there's spawning habitat there may not be being used very much. One last project to note. There was a reef restoration project, sometimes called the Elk Rapids Restoration, on Grand Traverse Reef. The goal for this was to improve spawning habitat for Cisco, lake trout, and whitefish. Matt Herbert provided this slide to me. It was a project with the Michigan DNR, the Nature Conservancy, and Central Michigan University. So about 450 tons of rock was added in August 2015. I don't think that's all of it, but it's an impressive pile of rock. And so they did some restoration on the reef, and here's what it looks like now. There's ongoing monitoring at this point to sort of quantify the benefits of this restoration effort. And then lastly, environmental principles. So it's been recognized recently that it's a challenge for fisheries agencies to sort of make progress towards environmental objectives on their own. And so there's been a process to identify these environmental principles at scales effective for implementation. There's 7 environmental principles for sustainable fisheries identified right now. They're linked through connections to functional habitats and management decisions. This is the focus of the comment session that's coming up, so you'll hear more about it there. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but just know that they are out there. So to conclude, I'm going to wrap up a little bit. That was a lot of jumping around, but we do have continuing progress toward fish community objectives and environmental objectives. Again, a minimum reconnection of 367 stream miles on 25 streams since 2011. We're continuing to develop and optimize decision support tools that will help improve work towards making solid decisions as far as barrier removals and restoration. Development of the landscape connectivity cooperatives, connectivity collaborative joining with the Great Lakes Basin Fish Habitat Partnership brings together a diverse community with consistent staffing to sort of continue efforts toward this. GIS mapping work continues, and some I didn't talk about here. One is the Great Lakes Aquatic Habitat Framework, the Sea Lamprey Visualization Tool, FishWorks, downstream strategies. There's a whole number of GIS projects that are going on to give us a better spatial picture of what's happening in the basin. As far as reef restoration, we've identified southern Lake Michigan spawning reef composition. There's also a yellow perch study in progress by the Natural History Survey in Illinois waters of Lake Michigan. And the Grand Traverse Bay Reef Restoration restored a critical reef in northern Lake Michigan. And I'm going to end with these 2 pictures, again, courtesy of Josh, but this was something they picked up on the side scan sonar here and then identified it as a crane that was sunk right offshore of, I think, Lake Forest in Illinois. So what's ironic about this is then I sort of was telling my co-coordinator, Joe Shahan, about it, and he said, "Where's that at?" And I told him, and he said, "Yeah, that crane was on a barge. My dad was on that barge and it sunk." Apparently his dad was fine, but he knew the story of how this crane ended up at the bottom of Lake Michigan, and it apparently happened around 74 or 75. So that was just kind of an interesting twist to this whole story. So that's all I have for you. I can try and answer any questions if you have them.